Hello everybody, welcome to this week's Life or Biz Wisdom. What I want to talk about tonight is about a behaviour or a pattern that I see in mostly women. I'm not saying it doesn't happen in men, but probably more so it happens with women. And that is about over-apologising. And if there's such a word, and if there isn't, hi Nadine, thanks for joining. If there isn't, then I'm definitely making it up now. In other words, saying sorry either too often or too readily, too quickly. And it's around then what impact that might have on the message that we give ourselves, first and foremost, even on an unconscious level, even if it's not conscious. And then also to the other person or the other people that we are interacting with. So what I mean by over-apologising is, so I don't know if you've actually have found this to be a habit that you've got into or whether you've seen it in other people, that if somebody says something to them, it's like, automatically, I'm sorry, without the person who's saying sorry really considering, is this actually necessary for me to say sorry just because the other person has said something? The other person might be actually pointing something out to help the person, and rather than accept that the person is helping, in a way it's the opposite of being defensive. It's actually then taking too much responsibility or doing it too quickly, taking it too quickly. And I actually believe that there's a middle road here. Now, I want to say right at the outset, I'm not for a second suggesting that we can't ever say sorry, that we should never apologise. I mean, that's of course not, that's just craziness, because we need to be able to take responsibility for things that we actually really believe that we had some part in, some responsibility in. So there are times when it's really, really warranted. So for me, if I've accidentally, in the supermarket, cut somebody off with my trolley, I'm going to say, I'm sorry. It's just courtesy, isn't it? It's just being polite. But when I contrast that, or if I did feel, if I was in a situation where someone was saying that they felt hurt by what I said, what I might say then, I was actually just questioning that, what I might say then is, I'm sorry that you felt hurt, or I'm sorry that what I said has hurt you, but then I might sort of explain more about it. But that's if I feel that there's a responsibility that I need to be taking. I'm not going to be just saying sorry just because they've said that something I've said has disagreed with them in some way, hurt them or irritated them or whatever. And the reason I want to talk about this is because if we are women in business, we don't want to be giving away our power, which is what essentially we do if we are saying sorry on a regular basis and as a pattern. And the thing is that we can actually do it so much that we're not even aware that we're saying it. And the reason that I know that is because that was the way that I was. When I grew up, it was a case of just being careful of what I said to my parents, particularly more so my father, and because he had a short fuse, a short temper. And I think what happened over the years and going into adult years was that I would actually say sorry for so many things as soon as I felt that the boat had been rocked a little bit, as soon as I felt there was any sort of tension. I took it upon myself to say sorry because I wanted to actually reduce that tension. And a lot of the time it worked. But what was happening was that, as I said, is that I was taking or giving away, I should say, my power. And I actually didn't feel that good after I said it. Momentarily I did because I relieved the tension. But then afterwards, even if I wasn't really that aware of it, I know that at some level, even if it was, as I said, subconscious, I was developing a habit of saying sorry at the slightest, almost the slightest thing. And I actually wasn't aware of doing it a lot of the time. Sometimes I was, but a lot of the time I wasn't. It wasn't until people would say to me, do you know you say sorry a lot? Or I'd say sorry for something and they'd say, why are you saying sorry for that? And it was like, oh, and it was so automatic, the behaviour, that I didn't even realise that I was doing it. And this happened on a number of occasions in my sort of later teen years and in my 20s, definitely, that there were so many people doing it that I realised, wow, I got to the point where I realised, wow, there must really be some sort of pattern here. And I started to look out for it. And I became more aware of when I was saying it. And sometimes I'd say it before I realised, and then, of course, I couldn't take it back. But then slowly over time, the more awareness that I had, the more that I realised the circumstances when I was doing it. And as I said, because I didn't like conflict because of a lot of the things in my childhood. So whenever I felt that there was any potential for conflict, mightn't have even been evident, but potential, that I would say sorry to get in first so that it could smooth the waters. But I know that over time, that actually affected my self-esteem. And it is so disempowering, and that's what can happen if we do this sort of, have this sort of behaviour habitualised where we are doing it regularly. And it could be things like, you know, sorry I was late, or sorry, I can't do it now, but I will try and do it later, or something, you know, something like that. They're not necessarily great big heavy things, but the fact that I said the number of times in a day, if I was able to count them, that I would say sorry to people was probably pretty high some days. And as I said, when people are pointing it out to me, that's when I realised, wow, what's going on here? So as I said, I started to look at becoming aware, started to set the intention of actually becoming aware of when I'm saying it, and then reflecting when I picked myself up, so to speak, or realised, picked out the times when I was doing it. When I reflected on it, I was able to perhaps, you know, to look at the situation and think, okay, what happened just before I said sorry? What was the tension? What was I feeling? You know, almost as if it was a movie that I could actually play back in my mind and see if I could, you know, freeze frame it to say, okay, what was happening within me that I felt that I had to say sorry? And then what was the person's response when I said it? And of course, a lot of people I said it to that didn't make any comment. It wasn't everybody that made a comment. And how did I feel immediately afterwards? And then how did I feel some time afterwards, once the situation itself was over? And I realised that I didn't feel good. I actually realised that there were times when I increased my awareness, but I then kicked myself for doing that. It was like, oh, what did I say that? Why did I say that? And that really wasn't helping. It raised my awareness, but then I had to learn to actually have the self-compassion. I talk a lot about that. To, as I said, calmly sit down and explore what it was that was happening, so that I'm not then beating myself up, but so I can actually look at how I can approach perhaps similar situations more in a more empowered way and actually not apologise. And one of the things that I learned to do was that when I started to notice that tension rising, I'd actually sort of perhaps even just pull myself away a little bit and just let the moment hang, if you know what I'm meaning. Let there be a little bit of stillness, a little bit of a micro gap, so that I wasn't just automatically saying sorry, that it actually gave me time to think, what was it that I wanted to say in response to the person? So that really helped me. And at the same time, I was working on my self-esteem in lots of other ways as well. So I think it's a whole different ways of me learning how to cope with that stress and not resorting to what I'd learned in childhood to actually create different habits. And one of the ways that I use it now, and this actually came up in a mastermind that I was in last year that actually had men as well as women. Well, I thought it was really interesting because we actually had a conversation about quite often if you get an email from somebody that you're waiting on that's, longer than you thought, and you might ask them, where is it? Or they know that it's been longer in coming than what was perhaps anticipated or what you would think would be okay, that it's that instead of just automatically saying, I'm sorry, I was late with the email, to actually word, and thereby giving away your power, to actually word it to say, instead, hi, whoever, thank you for your patience. I really appreciate it. And by doing that, and I actually took that on, we actually practiced it, and it changed things quite a lot for me. It meant that I wasn't just giving away my power, as I've said, but I was also acknowledging that there was a delay for whatever reason. So I was taking responsibility for that. And I was actually doing it in a way that I was appreciating the person's patience in this example. I was appreciating what the person's position was. So I wasn't just ignoring it, which isn't really, I don't think, appropriate either. I wasn't succumbing to it and surrendering to it, as I said, apologizing, just automatically. To me, it was a really good medium, middle ground. And quite often I received the response, oh, thanks, yeah, that's fine. I mean, obviously, it's not always going to happen. I can't guarantee it's always going to. But it actually is, the measure of how it feels afterwards, how if I respond to emails or whatever it is in that type of way, is so much better. I feel so much better in myself. It's so much more empowering than the way that I used to be when I was saying sorry all the time. So I really believe that in order for us to be successful in life generally, and obviously including in business, we need to be able to distinguish when we generally need to apologise. As I said right at the start, there's definitely times when that's necessary, but not doing it because, in a way, I was excusing myself for even being there in that situation. And that's ridiculous. That was such a sign, as I said, of my low self-esteem and my absolute desire to not, as I said, muddy the waters and create more tension. I'm actually a lot more comfortable with there being some tension. I don't want to fight. That's just not my nature. But I'm actually okay to disagree. And that's such a change for me. It's an absolute incredible turnaround. So what I would suggest is that you have a think about the situations where you might, and maybe you don't, and if you don't, that's great, but where you might actually be over-apologising, or maybe it's somebody that you know, and it's up to you whether you want to say something to them or not. That's depends on the situation, I think, a lot of the time. But if it's you, to actually set the intention, and this might be the first start of you becoming aware of when you're doing it, who you're doing it with, and why you're doing it. What's in the situation in the immediate moment, but also the bigger why more generally. Is it that this person you feel intimidates you? We can have people in our lives like that. Is it because that particular situation makes me feel really uncomfortable? And if I say sorry, I can get out of there more quickly, or something like that. Obviously, it will depend on the situation. That's why it's really good to explore what's happening with the times when this occurs for you, if this is something that you can relate to. And then to think about, and maybe even role play, talking with that, imagining you're talking with that person, or speak aloud as if that person's there, and and imagine something that they could say where you might have said, I'm sorry, and actually instead think of something else where you're acknowledging their position, but you're not taking away your power just by saying sorry. And whatever ways work for you, that align for you to build your self-esteem in other ways, is really important. This is one small part of us developing as people generally and as business owners. So I'd love you to, as usual, share any comments, any questions in the comments below. Is there something, only if you're happy or comfortable to share, if there's something that you feel that you've actually had happen with you, or that you've seen it in other people, how does it make you feel? And any suggestions, any other suggestions that I've come up with to how to get around that. So we really want to be setting, I talk a lot about us as women in business setting really firm boundaries and looking after ourselves. And this is a really great way in terms of distinguishing when to apologise and when it's not necessary, as a way of protecting our boundaries and respecting ourselves in a really positive way. So I will leave it there. If you do try this and you want to get back to me, you're welcome to contact me. That would be great. And as I said, or leave a comment underneath this post. Okay, that's all for this week. I'll see you later. Bye for now.